everyone, welcome back. We're finally at the second Incarnon video of the week, the Lex. This thing is incredibly satisfying to use, with crispy red crits or tons of status, complete with a hitbox the size of a truck. No matter how you build this weapon, it just gets the job done. Some of the strongest builds of this take advantage of how it can hit 100% crit and status at the same time. While mechanics and playstyles don't differ too much since it is a Plasmor family gun, there are still a couple of fun build options available. Let's see what this Catchmoon Prime has in store for us. As always, these weapons are the second generation of Incarnons, shipped with the Duviri Paradox update. The only way to get them is from Steel Path Circuit mode. After clearing the quest and having Steel Path unlocked, you need to pick two of the weapons on rotation to work towards on the Steel Path Circuit mode. Clearing rounds gives points to point tiers. Reach the appropriate point tier and return to this screen to claim your loot. The Incarnon Genesis adapters have a rotating 6-week schedule with the full details in this video's description. If you do not get the adapter for your week before weekly reset, it will not reappear for 6 weeks. If you get the adapter, you can use it on your appropriate weapon at Cavallero and the Chrysalis whenever you want. Keep in mind, attaching the adapter requires Duviri open world materials and has unlock requirements on the Incarnon tree perks, just like the original Incarnon weapons from the Angels update as well. Gimmick time. Shoot heads to charge Incarnon meter. Multi-shot counts as separate hits to build it faster. Alt fire to transform into Incarnon mode. This animation is affected by reload speed. The Incarnon mode turns this weapon into an Arcaplasmor style weapon. It's most reminiscent of the Catchmoon, but it's also different. For one, it shoots extremely slowly. With base 0.667 fire rate, you will want to stack as much fire rate as possible, from both anemic agility and arcane velocity when you can. Lethal Torrent as a flex slot option to get it up to almost 2.5 fire rate is also a solid choice. Fire rate buffing frames help immensely with the feel of this weapon. Why 2.5 fire rate? This weapon, where appropriate, has forced impact procs, just like Catchmoon, and can use Hemorrhage to turn these into slash procs. Unlike Catchmoon, Lex Incarnon retains the force impact procs across the entire hitbox range instead of just the first 9 meters like Catchmoon. This makes it far more effective for consistently proccing slash on everything you see. For the projectile shape of this weapon, it is deceptively small. The size of the visual shot, imagine this as the center block of a 3x3 grid. Here's a funny little overlay. This is how big the shot actually is, and for some proof, here's me shooting it to show the true invisible hitbox. Yeah, it's that big. This weapon has 28 meter max range and is affected by damage falloff. Feels a lot like pre-nerf Catchmoon, and you can run projectile flight speed Excellus to increase it out to 39.6 meters. The shot has infinite body punch through and 1.4 meter terrain punch through. This means you can shoot through small objects to hit enemies on the other side, as well as through shield lancers. However, keep in mind it has a 1.0 headshot multiplier, meaning headshots do not do more damage by default. Finally, this weapon does not have multiplicative GunCO, a surprising turn of events, as every single Plasmor type weapon to date has multiplicative GunCO. This means GunCO adds normally like base damage on this weapon and not an external total damage multiplier like Eclipse. This makes Lex Incarnon actually weaker than Catchmoon, who does have multiplicative GunCO and endurance content, where min-max damage really matters with a bunch of status procs. But for base Steel Path, where you just want to kill stuff in a single shot or raw damage without using extra primers, Lex Incarnon will perform better than Catchmoon. Catchmoon has a lower damage floor and higher damage ceiling due to lower raw stats but multiplicative GunCO, whereas Lex Incarnon has a higher damage floor and lower damage ceiling for tighter damage spread due to much higher raw stats, but additive GunCO. This means Lex Incarnon is a much better pick for casual playstyles and those interested in base Steel Path. It just works on its own across a very large level range and has massive hitboxes. Catchmoon will remain the better pick for killing enemies with hundreds of thousands to millions of health with the armor slapped on top. How about the Incarnon perks? This one is much simpler than Ceramic Dagger. It really comes down to are you sourcing damage from status effects or raw damage. I've heard that normal Lex ends up being a better weapon than Lex Prime after considering Incarnon perks, but there are other things going on due to bugs I will mention. Perk 1 is simple. You shoot heads to charge the meter and alt fire to activate it. You can activate even without a full meter, and it will grant % ammo equivalent to how much of the bar was filled. Incarnon mode holds a max of 20 shots and is unaffected by magazine or ammo max perks or mods. 10 headshots are required to fill the bar fully, and multi-shot counts for extra hits. You cannot shoot long dead bodies to build charges, however, you can continue to overkill enemy heads to build stacks because the enemy hitbox is not updated to a dead state until a moment after they are killed. That's all there is to know about charging Incarnon guns. Second perk grants a bunch of innate damage buffs. Hoplite grants even more on a shield break. It is important to note that GunCO ignores these innate damage buffs when calculating how much damage to add, making GunCO and CO weaker than expected on Incarnon weapons. This also means for any situation where you have to shoot multiple times to kill an enemy, Lex Prime is better than Lex Normal since it has higher original innate damage to scale with GunCO. Currently, the non-conditional buff of Hoplite Virtue granting 80 or 20 innate damage to Lex or Lex Prime variants does not work at all. This is a bug that has been fixed on Fearax and Ceramic Dagger Incarnon, so expect it to be fixed on Lex soon too. The other second perk grants some innate damage that does work on Lex Prime and Lex Normal. It is not bugged. The conditional part requiring a channeled ability though is extremely strict. The requirement is not actually a channeled ability, but specifically a channeled ability that must actively drain energy. Haven on Hildren draining shields will not activate this. In fact, any channeled ability on Hildren will not trigger Trusty Sidearm due to draining shields instead of energy. Desecrate does not trigger this if using Despoil and draining health instead. Desecrate also does not trigger this even without the augment except at the exact moment of looting a body for the animation duration. Therefore, Desecrate can lead to unpredictable and inconsistent uptime of this perk. Gloom only activates this perk when enemies are within your radius to drain energy and is not active when no enemies are present, thus not draining energy. All other abilities that channel by draining health or conditional energy drain will not trigger Trusty Sidearm at all or only at specific moments. Think about the frame you're using this on before you pick this perk. The list is way too long for me to provide, but all you need to know is it has to actively be draining energy at the moment you apply damage to proc. The third perk tree gives reload speed from empty, extra magazine size, and minus recoil. The thing is, while non-Incarnon Lex is a fair bit stronger with perk buffs, no one is gonna DPS with it. There are no special gimmicks or useful strats and augments to justify using the non-Incarnon mode besides charging the meter. The Incarnon mode does not care about recoil, and the recoil of the non-Incarnon mode for charging can be overcome with multi-shot, as a fully stacked galvanized diffusion will require only 3 headshots to fully charge the Incarnon meter. Exiting Incarnon mode will also always grant a full magazine to the Lex, meaning reloading from empty buffs are useless. Therefore, we pick plus 10 magazine sign for 18 shots to build up the meter. The fourth tree is also simple. We never, ever picked a plus 100% headshot damage bonus perk. Why? Because it only works on headshot. For whether crit or status, it's simple. If you're killing enemies with electric or gas proc builds today, then you will pick status for a more consistent status spread, but also because it literally provides more damage than crit. For raw damage builds today, be it Corrosive or Slash, where the Slash ignores status since it triggers from Hemorrhage, you will pick the plus crit perk to roughly double your raw hit damage. There are 5 different builds I'm showing today and all are used roughly the same way. Please spring Arcane Velocity when you can, as the Lex Incarnon has base 0.667 fire rate. They have minor playstyle differences and specialized niches. One important thing to note is that the Lex has a base reload speed of 2.3 seconds. This will factor significantly into the feel of a build if you do need to reload, since you will want to cut down on this when you can. If you need to manually reload Lex, cutting down reload speeds to 1 to 1.5 seconds is most comfortable. Below 1 second is unnoticeable in combat, whereas above 1.5 seconds starts getting annoying. Reload speed also affects Incarnon transformation animation, so it still has a use even if you never reload the non-Incarnon. Build 1 is your basic Corrosive build. You pick the crit perk with this since none of your damage is coming from status. You have your multi-shot crits, Bane, Corrosive. Lethal Torn, I would actually prefer Anemic Agility, since we already have so much multi-shot. I have polarity problems and thus couldn't bring it. Anemic plus Arcane Velocity would push fire rate up to 2.067, which is much more comfortable. GunCO is a flex slot here. Trash Fodder will die in 1 hit and GunCO is mostly wasted. Exodus units, on the other hand, will survive 1 to 2 shots, which will apply status since we're at 79.2% even on the crit perk, massively boosting follow-up shots to finish them off. Secondary Deadhead has longer stacks than Merciless, and headshots proc easily by shooting above heads due to truck-sized hitboxes. You do not need to always aim at heads, and only occasionally to stack Deadhead, and only on problematic units. This grants plus 30% headshot damage as well to an otherwise 1.0 times headshot multiplier weapon. You can optionally replace Prime Pistol Gambit with Galvanized Crosshairs, boosting your final crit to 184.8 for mostly oranges. Unadvised, but if you want pretty red crits, you can replace the Lethal Torn Anemic Agility slot with Galvanized Crosshairs instead, boosting you to 267.1% crit for mostly reds. This is only really worth it on a frame with fire rate buffs. Your Axelis is up to you on whether or not you want a lethal momentum to push fall off to 39.6 meters, or steady hands to remove 100% of recoil on this weapon with Deadhead. Simply point and shoot. That's all there is to this weapon build. Our second build is a classic scaling slash Catchmoon. Lex Incarnon. We once again picked the crit perk on the 4th tree. It is self-priming and is a middle tier option for longer Steel Path runs. It slashes well for a 100k plus, but do not expect it to one-shot level 9k enemies. However, you can kill them easily in multiple shots. This build replaces the corrosive elements with viral instead, so that we can self-prime viral at the same time as DPSing. Hemorrhage enables slash procs to scale out the weapon's massive base 1200 damage, which is why I can pull ahead of Catchmoon in non-primer builds even without multiplicative GunCO. Catchmoon has roughly 400 to 500 base damage as a reference. Primed Expel is extremely potent since it double dips bleeds for 2.4 times more damage. Since a ton of our DPS comes from slash procs, it is advised to run Merciless instead of Deadhead. While the 1200 base damage can still one-shot unarmored or low armor fodder on earlier Steel Path, allowing a questionable alternative of Galvanized Crosshairs over Prime Pistol Gambit, especially with Deadhead's headshot bonus, Merciless offers reload speed to speed up the Incarnon transformation. Keep in mind, this build has zero bonus fire rate whatsoever, and Arcane Velocity or a fire rate frame buff is basically mandatory for this option to not feel like a snail. Our third build is a very similar one to the previous, except it is min-max pure slash build for level 9k runs. You once again pick the 4th crit perk, since her status is irrelevant here. You will need an external primer to apply viral and other status effects. It is able to replace the viral mods with anemic agility and sharpened bullets, boosting its crit damage even further, while providing much needed fire rate to DPS. Alternatively, you can replace sharpened bullets with prime fast hands for 1.1 second reloads on the Narnon Incarnon and an insanely fast Incarnon transformation animation. Stacking Arcane Velocity still keeps us under 2.5 fire rate requirement to get a 70% conversion of impact to slash from Hemorrhage. You do not want to run Galvanized Crosshairs on this build, as it is meant for level 9k and you will be unable to kill anything with raw damage, since slash procs kills do not trigger Galvanized Crosshair stacks. Galvanized Shot will help the most here, since you're priming before shooting Lex, letting it benefit from plenty of procs even on the first shot and completely surpasses Hornet Strike. This one is simple. Prime with something, then switch to Lex and shoot, or just, well, keep shooting multiple times. The only kind of content that warrants this setup is level 9k runs or extremely tanky Steel Path units. Our final two builds revolve around Ensnare setups. Both of them use the plus status perk on the 4th tree because their damage comes from status prompts. It also leads to much more consistent AoE DPS since we're using gas and electric, both being AoE status elements. Unlike the first three builds though, there isn't a massive difference. If you want prettier red crits, you can choose to only lose a little bit of damage by picking the crit perks instead. The first is an homage to my gas slash Catchmoon build. How does this work? Hemorrhage gets kills going to stack weapon arcanes for base damage. Once Merciless is stacked up, the raw damage of overlapping gas clouds results in insane quadratic scaling, ripping enemies apart and even surpassing the damage slash procs can output at earlier Steel Path content. Gas clouds persist after enemies die and can continue to damage survivors in a crowd, unlike electric. This build does not work for a level 9k, primarily because GunCO is additive on this weapon instead of multiplicative and cannot surpass armor scaling, compared to slash procs in that level range. However, you can comfortably one-shot everything up to the level 600 to 1k range on this build, provided you cast Ensnare. At base Steel Path, it does not need a primer before you shoot. It is also a comfort build because you save a lot more of Incarnon mode shots. One shots, a bunch of kills. This is not an Unga Bunga build and may not give the playstyle feel you are looking for. Primed Expel is extremely important on this build because gas dots do not scale with elemental percent. Thus, Primed Expel will still boost gas dots by double dipping 2.4 times damage for a massive buff. Of course, it also double dips bleeds for 2.4 times. You may choose to swap Prime to Pistol Gambit with Galvanized Crosshairs, but keep in mind that gas clouds ever since last year can no longer consistently hit headshots on their daunt like they used to. The alternative is instead using an Ensnare electric DPS build. Keep in mind this build prefers the plus status perk on the 4th tree just like gas, but it is only a small damage loss if you pick the crit perk instead. Also, unlike gas, it is much easier to land headshot kills with chaining electric procs. This means Galvanized Crosshairs is an extremely viable choice over Prime Pistol Gambit. If you want pogged red crits on the crit perk, then you can replace Primed Quick Draw with Galvanized Crosshair instead, because electric only needs 1 mod instead of gas with 2, and electric scales with elemental percent. Just keep in mind this build is meant to be a maximum quality of life option. Enemies die in one shot, a base steal path to 1k, and priming lets it scale much further. Dead bodies no longer chain electric like gas clouds though, but this is mostly nullified by Lex having truck-sized projectiles being able to apply electric procs to all enemies evenly, ensure that everything dies at roughly the same time. We also opt for conjunction voltage instead, since this grants another plus 60% reload speed and plus 120% multi-shot. If you instead want higher damage, Merciless is still a solid option for the consistent plus 360% as well as reload buffs. Deadhead is also a good choice if you want to keep prime fast hands on the build. This will keep fast Incarnon transformations while having plus 30% final damage on electric headshot chaining as well as longer lasting weapon arcane stacks. There you go, all the ways you can play Lex Incarnon, a playstyle for everyone. It has many ways to scale up. Is it truly our Catchmoon Prime? I wouldn't exactly say so, but it does have better quality of life and is not strictly superior in a general sense. Catchmoon has a lower damage floor and a higher damage ceiling than Lex. Catchmoon also has fast reloads by default and does not need to build a meter to transform. It also has access to kit gun arcanes for even more damage scaling that normal guns cannot use. Consider Lex Incarnon as a side grade that caters better to the damage needs and hitbox of the casual player base, albeit with Incarnon charging mechanic as a requirement for access to its awesome power. Cheers. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get new information out always as soon as possible like I've been doing with Duviri. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.